We have here today a frequent occurrence of me messing up, goofing, being a silly goose. I have a lot of film, okay, like a lot of film, and a lot of like very weird film, interesting film, stuff I've just accumulated over the years, some of which I'm like holding on to because I want to make a video about. Others I'm just kind of holding on to because hoarding, I guess. I don't really know. Obsession. Pick a reason, I suppose. A few things that I'm like very fond of is Fuji slide film. Provia is one of my favorite things. Velvia is one of my favorite things, and it's going to be the discussion of today's video. Now, Velvia is a very expensive film. Like, if you can find it, it's expensive, and shooting it, getting it developed, all of that, there's a cost attached to it. So it's almost like this like special treat, something you want to savor, something you want to put into the finest camera that you have, and like really enjoy the experience, each tangible advance pull, each composition of the shot, lining up the exposure just right because it's a slide film and you know that the margin for error is so slim. You really want to take your time. And what did I do? What did I do? Let me tell you what I did. I went ahead and loaded it into this, an EOS 850. Now, if you aren't aware of this camera, I don't blame you. It's not the most popular camera in the world because it's completely automatic. Like, the mode selection dial on the top here is a battery check, program, a lock, depth of field, I believe, and self-timer. So there's not really a whole lot of user input that's required. There's no way to adjust aperture. There's no way to adjust shutter speed. There's no way to adjust the ASA. So you just pretty much put the film in there and let it rip, which on one hand is fantastic because it's just like a fun take on vacation kind of camera. On the other hand, though, it's not great for a lot of things, and I think in terms of savoring the film photography experience, it very much drops the ball in that regard. So why did I put Velvia in it, you might ask? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And that thought had haunted me for months. I could not stand to shoot this camera because I knew that every time I shot with it was just a mistake that I felt like I was admitting to, and I was embarrassed a little bit. Like, I was just like, this is one of the dumber things I've done. Take one of my favorite films that I don't have a lot of and put it in a camera that, while I enjoy shooting, it is not, in my mind, a great platform for that kind of film. So every time I shot, it was just kind of like, this is a waste, it's not going to come out. And the first few shots I took were at night too, which is a great time to shoot 100 speed daylight balanced film, as you can tell. And after that, it kind of became a bit more of like a time capsule. Like, I'd pick it up every month or so and just, take a shot with it because I was in between cameras at the time, or I didn't have the right color film loaded or whatever. I got a few sunrises out of it that I think are really beautiful. Got an ice storm here, so I got a few shots of like the snow. I got this nice little shot of our place as it was kind of coming together, so it's kind of cool to see the development there. And also, for any of those who are like, oh, why didn't you just take the film out? Great question. Interesting fact about the 850, if you put film into this camera, it actually loads all of the film into the camera, and then as you shoot, it starts to put it back into the canister. I'm not entirely sure why that is. It is a unique design feature, I would say, and I don't know if there's any other camera that actually does that, so obviously it wasn't super popular. It's interesting. So anyway, that's kind of enough about the camera. Let's get to the photos that I took, because after about a few months of it laying dormant, I decided, you know what, my friends are coming into town, might as well just use it while they're here, get through the roll, and then just move on to the next thing, because I do like this camera a lot and I want to shoot with it more, and kind of can't do that when I've got this really expensive roll of film in there. So friends come into town, and thus begins a sequence of photos that I thoroughly enjoy. These are the friends in question. As I mentioned previously, it is a daylight balanced film. And you'll notice a few things. One, the shadows are very, very dark here. You don't have as much dynamic range as you would in color negative film. So again, I would say that the EOS 850 did a great job in getting the exposures accurate, because these all turned out pretty good. But the thing I really want to point out when reviewing these images is there is this tangible feeling every time I look at one. Like, the grain structure of it is so sharp and the colors are so vibrant. Each image feels almost lived in a way. Even this kind of nondescript picture of a barn and some trees, the individual leaves of the tree, even at this distance, I feel like are still rendered adequately enough to kind of feel like I'm there. I don't know, there's just something about that richness and quality and that sharpness, and it is really fantastic. Like, there's no two ways around it, but there's just this vibrancy to each of the images, and it was enough that I'm going through the roll, reviewing it as I got it back from the lab, and regretting it, thinking that the people at the lab are going to be laughing at me because they're going through like, oh, this idiot fucking took pictures on a nice film with a dumb camera and took bad pictures, blah blah blah. But as soon as I started looking through the photos, I didn't care what anyone could have said about them. Like, I just like looking at them, even though they're not great photos, like they really aren't. It is the preservation of that time and of that experience with my friends being here, getting to hang out with them, and go on all these like little adventures that we had planned and stuff. It's the preservation of that, the richness of the detail in the images that really stuck out to me and made it so much more of a enjoyable experience to review the photos, that the nagging feeling of failure for loading this film into maybe a subpar camera completely washed away, because I was just blown away with the quality of images. And again, that really speaks to Velvia. I think it really handles skin tones well, as you can see in these portraits here. I was really pleased with how these came out. It's a very honest rendition of what people look like, which is nice to see out of slide film, where I've typically had the experience that it does a lot of things well, but portraits, not so much. Again, my experience hasn't been super great because I've shot with mostly Ektachrome or expired slide film, but this was also kind of expired, if I remember correctly. It was I think it's a few years old at this point, but you'd be hard pressed to see that. There's no visible lack of performance. Looking at the positives, the slides themselves, they look phenomenal, but it is really incredible how sharp and vivid everything is. And this image here of some umbrellas, I don't really remember why I took this, but I am glad I did, because the yellow that you're getting from here and then that blue of the sky, I feel like is a really nice color contrast, and it just feels warm, it feels bright, it feels fun, and I see this like really sharp and vibrant detail that I don't really see in a lot of the other film that I've been shooting lately. And I don't know if it's because I've been kind of shooting more lower end films, or like more of like the portrait-y kind of films that they kind of follow more of like the pastel washed out color, like the Ultramax, where it's like really poppy and vibrant color and maybe not as sharp of detail. And the contrast of the sharpness of this detail is really like, blowing my socks off, so to speak. But I honestly don't think that's the reason. I think it's just really good film. Like, it is very nice film. And it's one of the few instances where like I don't really want to spend a bunch of money on film, because I don't really think my photos are that great. But if I was going to be taking, in my mind, like really quality photos, and if I was like, all right, time to pony up and spend some real money on film, I would buy this. There's Ektachrome or E100 that's out there that costs, I think, about the same as like Velvia or Provia, But every time I've shot with it, I've really not enjoyed it. And I've talked about it a few times at this point, but to see the output here, I've spoken a lot about my love of Fuji slide film in the past, and every time I shoot with it, it's just this pleasant reminder of like, hey, do you remember how good this was? And it's like, oh my God, like, how could I forget? Honestly, like, looking at these, how could I forget how good this can truly be? And even this nondescript photo of a light bulb, I thought maybe if I really took my time, sat with my thoughts, I could come up with more articulation in which I could describe these images to you. But I think the best thing I can do is just presence. Like, there is a sense of presence, I feel like, in these photos. I feel like a lot of the Portras and Ultramaxes and Fuji 200s and Gold 200, all of those other things are able to present a rendition of what is out there, like the world. I think that something like this, or Ektar to a degree as well, is able to provide this like depth, this added depth of reality, if that makes sense, because this is how I remember seeing it, but it's a little bit more vibrant, it's a little bit more punchy, but it's still like pretty spot on to how I remember it. And there's the texture of the fabric of the umbrella is vividly detailed in this image in a way that I feel like I'm touching it through the computer screen. I don't feel that way with a lot of other photos that I take. I don't feel that way with a lot of other film that I shoot. The last two photos I really want to talk about, what appears to be a Jeep that was on fire at one point. And as you can see, it's kind of like melted down a little bit. And I thought it'd be kind of funny to take photos of it as if it was like the standard car photography bit, but with a burnt out car. I don't really know exactly what happened here. The images that resulted, I think, are phenomenal. In the background, you have these like really green and vibrant trees, and got this like nice, red flowered bush there. There's just little pops of color here and there. And the Jeep itself, it's kind of like, it's drooped down a little bit, it's melted to a degree. I think the tires popped on the one side, so it's a little bit slanted. There's like this kind of flow in the car. There's so many little like lines and details and little tangible qualities to all of the parts of the Jeep that are melted onto the pavement. Moving into the side profile shot, you can see just how limited the dynamic range is, because here you have like the top of the Jeep, which is white, was white, I should say. It's not quite blown out, but then the interior, which is shadowed because, the inside, is completely pitch black. Like, it's gone. There's no detail there whatsoever. That level of contrast really adds to the punchiness of all these details. They're so much more sharp and vivid because they're standing out from that contrast. I mean, each little part of that engine bay, I feel like there's just this level of texture to it, I would say, definition, detail, all of these, big flashy words, but it's all very present. I was just really impressed with the film overall. And I think the main takeaway is that I'm really excited to shoot the remaining 4 rolls in that pack. I'm very excited to shoot with the EOS 850 in the future. Not in that same combination, probably. I guess just like Fuji slide film is really good. And it's one of those times where I spent a lot of money on it, but the results that came back were just fantastic and worth every penny. And can't recommend it enough, I guess. That's just why I keep going back to, is like, wow, this was a good investment in terms of the quality of images it produced. And I think I've spoken about it a lot to this point, but ultimately it doesn't really matter all that much what camera you use. If the lens you have is not, submerged in a swamp, you can take a good photo with just about anything. But I think it does go to say something about the the tools you're using does impact your experience, and it will impact, I think, the quality of photos you take, because it puts you in a different mindset of, you know, how am I taking this photo? What time am I spending on it? Your interaction with the photo. And this kind of was a little bit more just kind of taking the photo, not really thinking too much about it. And towards the end was just kind of trying to get through the roll of film. But ultimately, I do think it provided these images that are a lot more candid than I normally would have taken with this film. And for that reason, I think that vibrancy and that texture and that presence is even more present because I was more present. I wasn't kind of trying to capture the perfect moment. I wasn't trying to like move all the chess pieces on the board to set something up that would be this like beautiful, vivid, detailed thing. I was just like, fuck, gotta get through this shit, you know? And I think because of that, it just adds to the surprise I had when the photos came out half decent. And that's kind of why I wanted to make the video in the first place. Take a little victory lap, admit my own shortcomings as a person who fails to plan things in advance, but then also to celebrate the serendipitous nature of film photography and the results that come from it. Anyway, that is all. It's a really fucking confusing video, but I think we made it all right to the end. Appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. Join the channel as well if you would like. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Be doing a little write-up on the film here, and hopefully, you know, try to combine some of these thoughts into a little bit more of a succinct thing for people to digest. So feel free to check out the link down below to that at my website. Appreciate it as always, and yeah, I guess I'll catch you on the next one.